Hi, welcome to another edition of Counterpunch with Trevor Loudon, the show that exposes the ongoing world communist revolution and attempts to roll it back. Well, I want to talk about books today, specifically one book, because we all should be reading. We're in a revolution and we need to understand the nature of what we're up against. If we don't do that, we are doomed to fail. If we do read, if we do understand, we have a fighting chance. Now, there's some great books out there on communism, great books on revolution. You know, the 9 commentaries on the Communist Party, which you can get through Epoch Times, is a fantastic resource. Diana West's Red Thread and America Betrayed are excellent books. The Black Book of Communism is a classic. New Lies for Old by Golitsyn. I swear by that book. That is how you understand what's happening in the world today. You know, Golitsyn laid it out. Former KGB officer laid out the communist long-term plans in that book. Red Cocaine by Joe Douglas. If you wonder why we have a drug problem in the West, you can look no further than the communist movement. They are behind much of what we see happening today. Disinformation by Ion Pacepa, the former Romanian intelligence chief. Excellent work, details how the communists basically control the information flow in our societies. And The Woke Supremacy by Evan Sayat is an excellent book on the woke movement of today, which is really cultural Marxism. And I'll review that book in a future episode. Today I want to talk about a book by a very good friend of mine, a man called James Simpson. I've known him for years. He's a scholar. He's a former economist in the Office of Budget Management under Reagan and Bush. Very, very sophisticated follower of the communist movement. And he's written a great book, Who Was Karl Marx? But I'll give you the full title, because it's not just about Marx. Who was Karl Marx? The men, the motives, and the menace behind today's rampaging American left. Now, that's a pretty good title, I think. It's basically one of the best books out there. It's 135 pages, very well written. Jim is a beautiful writer. He's very concise. He's very accurate, very entertaining in his writing. It's one of the best books I've seen for a novice, somebody who really doesn't have much of a background in what's threatening us. You know, you might be got really concerned recently about the critical race theory being taught to your kids. You might be concerned about the obvious stealing of an election, about race riots across America, communist-inspired race riots. You might be wondering about political correctness and you know, the cancel culture and all of these things. Well, Jim's book lays it all out. You'll be able to connect the dots in a very short space of time. So I think Jim has done a fantastic service to the American public, to the world public, to understand a phenomenon that is threatening to destroy everything that we hold dear. Our lives, our prosperity, our children's future, everything that we hold dear is under threat right now. And Jim has written a book that will tell you how it all works. It's a great starter. It's a great reference work. It's going to put so much together for the novice and for the more sophisticated, you know, even for people who've been studying this subject for a long time. I learned lots from Jim's book. I'm sure you will learn lots no matter what level you're starting out at. You might be a beginner, you might be a novice, you might have served in military intelligence or whatever. You'll still learn from Jim's book. So what Jim does, he goes into Marx, the nature of the man, his background, his family background, his early Christianity, his turn away from religion. Well, not from religion so much. He changed from worshipping God to worshipping the devil. There's a very satanic root behind communism. It's really a political manifestation of Satanism, in my opinion. And Jim lays that out pretty well. He talks about Marx, the man, the reprobate character he was. And, you know, by their fruits shall ye know them. You know, he had an incredibly dysfunctional family. He had children dying of starvation. Just a moral reprobate, a man steeped in jealousy and resentment and just general malicious hatred, the kind of guy you would walk around on the street and hold your nose while you're doing it. Not a good man at all. And I'm a pretty charitable guy. I try and see the virtues in everybody, including my enemies, including my opponents, because most people have a spark of good in them, but it's pretty hard to find one with Karl Marx. So Jim does a great job in exposing the man's character and where he got his ideas from, how he developed his ideas, and how those ideas took root, because they're the guiding ideas of our society now. Political correctness, white privilege, Black Lives Matter, all of these things go back to Marx. Marx was an influence on all of them. So after Marx, see what Jim does, he doesn't just deal with Marx, he deals with those who came after Marx, those who developed Marx's ideas. And Marxism is a little bit like a religion. It is a religion. And most religions have different denominations. You know, Buddhists have different types of Buddhism. Christians have multiple denominations. Islam has a whole bunch of different variations. Judaism does too. Every religion has its denominations, its offshoots, and so does Marxism. Jim does some great work exposing Sergey Nazarov. Now, you probably never heard of him, but next to Marx, he was one of the most influential people on the Marxist movement, a big influence on Vladimir Lenin. He was a young public servant in mid-19th century Russia. He formed a clique around him. He wrote a manifesto, the Revolutionary Catechism, which was picked up, was a favorite of Black Panthers. It was a very influential document even today. And what he lays out in a few short words is how to destroy a society. Because his whole thing is to bring man to paradise on earth. First, you have to make things so damn miserable. You have to reduce humanity to such a mess, such a state of distress, such a state of complete abject misery, so that they will revolt, so they'll have a revolution and establish the socialist paradise. So Nechayev's idea was to make man infinitely happy, you first have to make him infinitely miserable. So everything you see around us, from Black Lives Matter to critical race theory to the environmental movement, the radical gay movement, all of it is there to create chaos and misery and destruction. Because to a Marxist, only through chaos and misery and destruction can mankind ultimately achieve happiness and paradise on earth. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? Christians, American constitutionalists, they sort of have this wacky belief that you make things better for people and people get happier. And that makes them want to make things better for everybody else and better for themselves and their families. And you keep on building and progressing, and you start out with maybe a poor society, maybe an oppressed society, and you gradually expand prosperity and freedom, and people get happier and more contented and lead more fulfilling lives. That's the Western view. That is the traditional Christian, Judeo-Christian view. It's a view that most people on the planet hold. You start out in life, you keep on working on yourself and your surroundings to make them better all the time. And although it is not a straight line to progress, you're always aiming to make things better. While Marxists, inspired by Nechayev, had the opposite view. Humanity is corrupt, society is corrupt. Only by destroying everything around you, bringing man to a state of abject poverty and despair and misery, then you can start to rebuild and create a happy man. Well, that's their philosophy, and it's been applied all over the world with shocking results, and we're still yet to see the paradise arising from the ashes. And guess what? We never will. Because people like Nechayev, they understood that yes, we will make man miserable, but there will never be a paradise for them. There may be for us. We will have the riches, we will have the wealth, we will have the power. But the common peasant, the common working man, he is only a means to our goals. And that's communism, folks. That is communism. So then Jim really goes into Nechayev and the influence that Nechayev had on many of the following communist leaders. Now, Dostoevsky, the famous Russian author, wrote a book called The Devils, about a small sect of crazy young intellectuals who wanted to create revolution and misery, just nihilists. They believed in nothing. They wanted to destroy everything. Well, that book was based on Nechayev. Dostoevsky himself was a radical who went to jail, experienced a conversion, and became a conservative and an upholder of civilization. He understood, because he'd been there, the demonic side of human nature, and that some people would use that to further their aims, their political goals. Then Jim also deals with a very famous man, Willie Munzenberg. You've heard of the concept Communist Front, right? Well, we see them all around us. Black Lives Matter is a communist front. The Women's March is a communist front. The Democratic Party now is basically a communist front. They are organizations that are not overtly communist, but controlled by communists. And these are the idea of Willie Munzenberg. He started out as a communist, a German communist in the 1920s, went to the Soviet Union, and basically sold the communists on the idea of setting up all these front organizations all through Europe and the United States, hundreds of them in the motion picture industry, in the arts and sciences, everything. The Communist Front was really Willie Munzenberg's idea. And like many revolutionaries, he ended up being swallowed by his own revolution, killed by his own people. But his influence is still felt today all around us. He looks into Lucas, he looks at the Frankfurt School, the famous German communists who fled Nazi Germany in the 30s and set up at Columbia University in Berkeley, etc., who invented political correctness, who invented the cultural Marxism that we see all around us today. He looks at Antonio Gramsci, the famous Italian Communist Party theoretician. I've dealt with Gramsci before. He's really the inspiration of democratic socialists of America, the Bernie bros, Bernie Sanders movement. Gramsci's idea was that workers didn't support communism because they were too indoctrinated by the state. They were too indoctrinated by the church and the culture. So to get people ready for communism, communists had to go into the church, into the movie industry, into culture, into sport, into government, into the unions, into every institution of society, and take it over and change the people's consciousness. We are seeing that everywhere today. The Bernie Bros are a classic example. These young kids, all fired up for socialism, have no idea what it means. They are Gramsci's grandchildren. So Jim's bringing all these threads together. We've got to understand these people are all helping each other. They're all guiding each other. They all draw from each other. Just as Christianity, the Gospels, draws from famous Christian writers like Thomas Aquinas and others, Marxism is a movement, a religion that draws from previous people, that shapes, that is constantly evolving. So Jim is looking at all the threads here and making it so simple and so easy to comprehend. There's a lot of talk right now about critical race theory and critical theory. Well, as Jim explains, this comes out of the Frankfurt School, and the idea was real simple. Let's just criticize everything. If you want to have a new society, you have to destroy people's confidence in the old. We have to criticize religion. We have to tear down respect for religion. We have to criticize the government, tear down respect for government, tear down respect for every institution, everything that people look up to. Right now, they're doing that to the military. They're about to start doing that to Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. They're going to come after him. They want to destroy him because so many people look to him as a leader. President Trump was a classic example. We see a little bit of criticism for him. Not so much for previous Republican presidents because they weren't such a threat to the communists as President Trump was. Who are the most criticized Republicans? Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. Why? Because they were the biggest threats to the communists. So critical theory is you criticize everything about society. You tear it down. You destroy respect for it. You produce children who don't believe in anything, have no idealistic values. They don't believe in their government. They don't believe in their parents. They don't believe in their church. They don't believe in their school system. They don't believe in authority. They believe in nothing, and they're suckers for anything. That is rampant rampant in our society. And critical race theory is just applying that Marxist principle to race. White people are automatically racist. Black people and brown people are automatically oppressed, no matter how rich they are or how many millions of dollars a year they're earning. So critical race theory is all around us. And Jim goes into the people who gave us that. And it ties it in together beautifully. Marcuse, part of the Frankfurt School, a big influence on Angela Davis, the famous communist radical, who's now a big influence on the abolish prisons movement. The prison abolition movement, the defund the police movement is all part of the communist movement. Get all the criminals out of the prisons, let them run rampant on the streets. Defund the police, demoralize the police, criticize the police, attack the police, so they cannot keep society stable. So you get all these criminals running around creating mayhem. The police aren't protecting people, so people lose confidence in the government. That is the goal. People lose confidence in the existing structures of their society. That's preparation for revolution, for a change in the social order. Jim did a lot of work on Cloward and Piven back in the day. These were two academics from New York, both members of Democratic Socialists of America, America's largest Marxist group, and they had this brilliant idea. Let's get everybody in New York on welfare. Let's just overload the welfare rolls until a New York government collapses, and then we can have socialism. Rudy Giuliani called them out personally for trying to wreck New York. They were behind them. They applied the same principles to voting. They were behind the famous motor voter laws where you sign up to register your car, you automatically get signed up to register to vote. Their idea was to broaden the franchise so that everybody voted. Well, sorry, I'm not in favor of everybody voting because some people pay little attention to politics and they don't have any understanding of the issues. I'd rather they didn't vote, thanks very much, because voting is a massive responsibility. But the idea of the left is to get everybody voting. Everybody, the most manipulable people, the most ignorant people voting, the people that can be easily tempted with state goodies, who can be manipulated into supporting all sorts of rabid left-wing positions. So they applied that principle to voting. Get everybody voting. People will vote for people who offer them benefits. That will bankrupt the system. It'll bring down society, and then you can have socialism. So Jim explains this facet of it. This is all playing out now. This is playing out on the border right now. The border is being overwhelmed right now. And this could eventually collapse our society. But all of it is deliberate. All of it is a plan. All of it is a scheme. And Jim proves it very well. Black Lives Matter, Antifa. Black Lives Matter is a communist organization run by Liberation Road, a pro-Chinese Communist Party. And Jim goes into that. He goes into the Marxist roots of Antifa. Because, Antifa are just protesters, the peaceful protesters, according to the media. No, they are Marxist revolutionaries. And people need to understand this is all part of a plan. See, what most of us here, we all see these disparate things. We see chaos on the border. We see the Black Lives Matter movement. We see the LGBTQ movement playing havoc in our schools. We see critical race theory. We see pipelines being closed down by radical Native American protesters. We see, the gutting of the US military by the Obama administration. We see the Green New Deal, which is about to completely alter and destroy the US economy. We see all of these things and we worry about some of them, but what we don't see is that they are an integrated whole. They are all part of a mosaic, a fabric. They are all designed to bring this country to its knees, to destroy it. This is the vision of Nechayev. You cannot have paradise on earth, the communist paradise on earth, until you destroy Western civilization completely, and in particular, until you can destroy the United States of America. You talk to communists, and this is an argument, you talk to communists and they'll say, you say, look, haven't you seen communism fail everywhere? And this will be their answer. Well, it failed in Russia, it failed in Cuba, it failed in Venezuela. Yes, it did. Why? Because the United States sabotaged it. The United States drove the Russians into bankruptcy. The United States blockaded the Cubans, forced them into the arms of Russia. The United States is trying to starve the Venezuelan government into submission. If we want socialism, if we want communism, the number one impediment is the United States. So they don't acknowledge the failure of their system. They blame the United States for even the failure of communism. And therefore, to have their communism, they have to destroy America. Now, Jim does one more thing, which I think is very, very valuable. We look to China as the leader of the world communist movement right now. And yes, it probably is in many ways. It's certainly a major player. The communist parties around the world look to the leadership of the Communist Party of China. But what Jim points out is the deep importance of Russia, of Moscow, to the world revolutionary movement. We need to understand the Russians have not gone away. They're an integral part of the movement. They're a leading part of the movement. And you have many naive people in the West who think, wow, we can ally with Russia against China. We can Russia's going to save us from the Islamic hordes threatening Europe. Russia's really our friend. Couldn't be further from the truth. I don't know the exact leadership structure of the world revolutionary movement. It appears to come from China. But as Jim points out, and I agree, Russia is a very, very integral part of it. And when I say Russia, I mean Moscow. I mean Putin and his cronies. They're very much part of the revolutionary movement. So look, I hope you'll buy Jim's book. You can get it the usual ways, get it online or whatever. It is one of the best books I have seen for a very long time that lays out the threat we are facing in a very simple manner and draws all of the threads together. So buy a copy. Buy several copies, use them for Christmas presents, for birthday presents. They will enlighten people better than virtually anything I've seen around lately, because it's so simply written, it's very concise, and written in a way that anybody could understand and anybody can come away enlightened. So please get the book. I don't get any commission off it. Jim's my friend. But I'd be saying this no matter who wrote it, because he's done a really, really good job. So thanks for watching, guys. Order Jim's book today, James Simpson, Who is Karl Marx? And you won't regret it. So thanks for watching, people. We'll hope to see you soon. God bless America, and God bless all of you. Thank you.